great pleasure to welcome a very fascinating woman who's written a very interesting book. It's called Your Face is the Mirror of My Soul. We're joined now by Rinpoche. She is out in Alaska today, and it's a book of different types of poetry, and she's going to tell us about it. She's had a very interesting life, and she joined us today via the telephone. Rinpoche, thanks for being with us. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I know you grew up, or at least part of your life spent in my hometown, New York, so it's good to talk to at least a former New Yorker. How did you wind up in Alaska?
I love the cold weather, and I always wanted to go somewhere where it's cold, and I love the mountains, and I can see the mountains from my living room window, so it's wonderful.
Well, you picked a good place if you want cold weather. Well, let's talk about this book. Since I got it, I read through it, and it is interesting. It's kind of your poetry. Is it Buddhist poetry, or explain a little bit about what the topic of the book is?
It is what it's called, in the traditional Buddhist language, it's what it's called Vajra Dohas, which is poetry which arises spontaneously in the heart of the practitioner when they're living a life of practice, and it's poems that express one's experience that arise, spontaneously, and so that actually is what happened with me with the poems. I didn't really even think that I could write poetry. I was a prose writer, and I always thought of myself as writing prose, and then suddenly I found myself writing these poems. So, I was really surprised by it.
It's more of an inspiration, then. It's something that kind of came to you at one time, and then you just kept writing it? Is that how it happened?
Well, the poems were written individually, but actually for several of them, I heard the lines going through my mind. Like I heard the first line, or the first few lines going through my mind, and then, maybe I would be lying in bed, or it would wake me up in the middle of the night. And so I would just get up and write down what I heard, and then the rest of it I would work out, but the first few lines would be actually almost feel like they were being dictated to me.
Now, you weren't brought up in the Buddhist religion. How did you kind of gravitate toward that?
I was raised in a home that was nominally Jewish, but there was really no practice at all at home. And so when I was in my early 20s, I went out to San Francisco, which was, that was at during the Flower Child era. And that's where I met my teacher, or heard about my teacher, who was Neshama Trungma Rinpoche, who was one of the first teachers to bring Tibetan Buddhism from from Tibet when he escaped from the Chinese communists. Even before that, actually, I put myself through college in San Francisco, and I took a course in Buddhism just on a lark. I was actually a psychology major, and I got locked out of my courses. I couldn't get the sufficient number of credits that I needed. So just on a lark, I took a course in Buddhism, and when I heard the professor explain the Buddhist teachings, right away he talked about the Four Noble Truths, which is the first set of the Buddhist teachings. And the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And when the professor said that, I remember thinking, oh, here's finally a religion, a teaching which tells the truth. And right then, I became a Buddhist in my heart, even before going down to, replace or anything.
That's interesting. So the word Rinpoche or Rinpoche is actually more of like a reverend or something like that, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a title for a high-level teacher who has experienced the teachings and actualized them in her life, or his or her life, rather than merely understanding them on an intellectual level.
Well, you've broken new ground, because you're, as far as I understand it, the only American woman and only the second woman overall to have that title. Is that right?
Yes,
Well, that's a great honor.
Well, thank you. It has been traditionally reserved, for men, and I was not given that title. The one other woman who has ever had to use that title, and all of these years since it's been, Tibetan Buddhism was honored or acknowledged in that way, I have to tell you that I gave myself the title. I believe that the guru who was part of me, my root guru, Neshama Trungma, who was inside me, who was part of me, who lives in my heart, encouraging me to do that. But I was not actually given that title by any outside person, so I need to explain that.
And you've had an interesting life and career. Just from reading some of your bio, you've traveled all over the world to India, and I just head out to San Francisco, and different occupations, and it all kind of led you back to this Buddhist poetry. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I first became a Buddhist in the 1970s. And then, I did a lot of different things in between. I joined, Trungpa's organization, which was called Vajradhatsu at the time. And then, I was not always within the organization. So I had a lot of different life experiences. But whatever I did, I always remained a Buddhist in the sense, we talk about what is called path carrying in the Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And what path carrying means is that all of one's life experiences are carried onto the path, or become part of the path, so that, whatever one does, it's not separate. One is not, leaving the path, which is impossible because the path is the whole of one's life. And so, yeah, it always did come back to, being to Buddhism, but I would say that I never really left it in that sense, no matter what I was doing.
And just reading through some of the poems in high school, Rinpoche, we had a class in haikus, and these are similar in a way to kind of the Japanese or Chinese-Japanese haiku kind of formation of the poem. Is that right, or am I looking at it differently?
Haiku is a specific type of poetry that is done in, that is practiced among people who practice Zen Buddhism. My poetry is not haiku. Yeah. Some of it might have, a haiku format. A few of them may, but, so it's actually accidental. But I was not setting out to write haiku. And most of it is not in that format. I should say there are also several essays, a number of essays in the poem, in the book, personal essays, and so it's not entirely poetry.
Right.
It's a mixture of poetry and essays.
Well, it's an interesting read, and I think the folks are going to enjoy it. It really tells a story not only of your life, but what you're thinking about, and your experiences have definitely colored your poetry. And Rinpoche, give out a website, if you will, people that may be interested in getting the book or contacting you. Do you have something you want to give out to the folks?
The name of the website is joyofenlightenment.org.
Appreciate you joining us today, and Your Face is the Mirror of My Soul is the name of the book. And Rinpoche, appreciate you taking a few minutes, and look forward to talking again down the road. Thanks for being with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.